The sandstorm had passed hours ago, but James could still feel the desert dust clinging to his throat. His horse limped dangerously. Every step the animal took was a reminder that time was running out. He had ridden for 3 days without rest, running from a past that no longer mattered. All that mattered now was finding water, shelter, and maybe a second chance. When he saw the first hints of smoke among the red rocks, his heart sank. It could be a trap. It could be his salvation. In Apache country, the line between the two was as thin as a knife's edge. But his horse would only make it further, and James knew it. He stopped at the crest of the hill, raising his hungerless hands to show that he carried no weapon in them. The rifle was still in its scabbard, but his hands were empty. It was the only way to get closer without becoming a target. He waited. The sun was beating down on his back as figures began to emerge from among the tents. They were not warriors. They were women, many women. And behind them, an imposing figure who walked with the authority of one who had seen too many seasons change. Dismount slowly, the woman said in perfect Spanish, better than her own. Her voice was deep, calm, but it carried a weight that brooked no argument. Your animal is wounded. We too know what it is to suffer. James dismounted carefully, feeling his legs protest after so many hours in the saddle. The horse snorted faintly, and James felt a pang of guilt. He had pushed the animal beyond its limits. The woman stepped close. Her hair, more gray than black, was gathered into a thick braid. Leader of this clan, do you have a foreign name? James, he replied, his voice hoarse with thirst. James Crawford. I am not looking for trouble. I only water for my horse, and a place to rest for the night. Mother Rain studied him for a long moment. Her dark eyes seemed to read something in him that James himself had forgotten existed. Water we have, she said finally. Rest perhaps, but nothing in this world is free, James Crawford, especially not now. Two young women came forward and led the horse away with a gentleness that surprised James. Mother Rain led him toward the center of the camp, where a fire burned under the relentless sun. Around the fire, James counted quickly 22 women, all dressed similarly, all with the same look in their eyes, a look he knew well lost. By the way, if this story is captivating you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where in the world you're listening from. It makes us very happy to know that you're with us. You're observant, Mother Rain said, noticing how James looked at the women. Yes, they're all widows. Last year, the drought was relentless. The men went to fetch water beyond the mountains. None returned. The desert swallowed them all. James felt the weight of those words. 22 widows, a camp with no grown men, just old men, and children. I'm sorry, he said, and he meant it. Your lament does not bring back our dead, Mother Rain replied, without cruelty, only with the brutal honesty of someone who has learned that pretty words do not change reality. But perhaps your strength can help us with something more important. She led him to the edge of the camp, where the land began to rise into the mountains. James followed the direction of her finger as she pointed to a distant peak half hidden by clouds. Up there is the treasure of our ancestors, Mother Rain explained. Jewelry, silver tools, sacred objects that have been passed down through the generations for longer than I can count at this. When we knew the drought was coming, we hid them in the mountain cave to protect them. And what happened? James asked. It was then that the flood came. Mother Rain sighed. The latter rains destroyed the path. Boulders the size of houses blocked the way. Our young men are brave, but they do not have the strength or the knowledge to move those stones. We have tried 3 times. The last time, we almost lost 2 boys. James, he narrowed his eyes at the mountain. He had worked in mines for years before he became what he was now. He knew the rocks, he knew the mountains, he knew the tricks of moving what seemed immovable. That treasure, he asked carefully. What does it mean to you? Mother Rain looked him straight in the eyes. It means our survival. Without it, we have nothing to trade when winter comes. Without trade, there is no food. No food. He let the sentence hang in the air. James nodded slowly. He understood perfectly what was not being said. I can try, he said finally. I've moved rocks before. I've worked in places where one false move meant being buried alive, Mafu. If you give me tools and a few young men willing to learn, I can bring that treasure back. For the first time, Mother Rain smiled. It was a small, tired smile. But it was real. Then rest tonight, James Crawford, she said, because tomorrow, at dawn, you're gonna need all your strength. And maybe, just maybe, the mountain's spirits will decide to be generous to a stranger who came when we needed him most. That night, as James lay under the stars with his stomach full for the first time in days, he couldn't stop thinking about those 22 women and their looks of cautious hope. He didn't know that by accepting this mission, he had just changed the course of his life forever. Sunrise painted the sky orange and purple when James woke. He hadn't slept well. Mother Rain's words had been circling his head all night like birds trapped in a cage. 22 widows, 1 treasure lost. A mountain that had defeated the clan's best warriors. When he emerged from the tent they had borrowed, he found 5 young men waiting for him. They couldn't have been more than 16 or 17. Their faces were serious, too serious for their age. Life had stolen their youth before their time. I am Swift Eagle, the tallest said in a tone that mixed respect and defiance. These are Grey Wolf, Strong Stone, North Wind, and Silent River. Mother Rain says you know how to retrieve the treasure. We know the mountain. They were lean but wiry, with muscles forged by years of hard living. Their eyes gleamed with a dangerous mix of hope and skepticism. They didn't trust him yet, and James couldn't blame them. Tell me everything. Every detail counts. One false step and none of us will come down alive. For the next hour, over cornbread and dried meat, the young men described the path. The trail started out easy, but after the first hour, it became a treacherous climb. The boulders blocking the cave entrance were enormous, some as big as buffalo piled up chaotically by the force of the water. Last time we tried to move them, Strongstone explained, grimacing as he touched his arm. Meneka. It almost crushed me. The rocks are oddly balanced. When you push one, another one moves. It's like the mountain is alive and doesn't want to let go. James nodded. He knew this type of formation. He had seen similar collapses in the mines of Colorado. The trick wasn't brute force, it was understanding the balance, finding the keystone that held the others together. They carried ropes, hardwood crowbars, and some water. James had also asked for some sturdy pieces of wood that they could use as wedges. The young man watched him curiously as he carefully selected and viewed each piece, testing its strength, discarding the ones with invisible cracks. In the mines, James explained as he worked, I learned that the right tool is worth 10, strong men, and patience is worth 100 one up below. The climb began just as the sun reached its highest point. The heat was brutal, but James knew it was better than the alternative. They needed light to work, and the mountain became deadly after sunset. For the first 2 hours, the path was exactly as described, steep, yes, but manageable. James watched every step, every loose rock, memorizing the terrain for the return. Carrying the treasure down would be the most dangerous part. Why are you doing this? Ray Wolf asked suddenly, having been walking silently behind him. You are not one of us. This is not your problem. James paused, wiping sweat from his brow. It was a fair question. Years ago, he said slowly, when I was younger and more foolish, I let my pride destroy something important. Someone asked me for help, and I denied it because I thought I had more important things to do. That person died waiting for help that never came. The young men were left in the lurch. Silence. James continued walking. I can't change the past, he added without looking back. But I can choose who I am today. And today, I can help. When they reached the site of the collapse, even James felt the air leave his lungs. The boulders were larger than he had imagined. Some were the size of wagons, stacked at an impossible angle that defied gravity. Behind them, barely visible, was the cave entrance. Mother of God, Swift Eagle murmured. Every time I come here, it seems more impossible. James approached slowly, studying the formation with a critical eye. He touched each rock, feeling its temperature, its texture, searching for signs of movement. He knelt down. He observed the spaces between the stones, the angle of support, the pressure points. The gangman watched him with a mixture of curiosity and impatience. There is a way, James said, finally pointing to a barrel-sized rock near the base. That one right there is the keystone. If we move it just right, the others will redistribute themselves without collapsing. What if you get it wrong? Asked Northwind. Then we all run really fast, James replied with a tight smile. But I won't get it wrong. Trust me. They spent the next hour preparing the ground. James showed them how to place the wooden wedges, how to use the levers, how to use the right angle to multiply their force, how to read the warning signs of a rock about to shift unpredictably. In the mines, he explained as they worked, we used to say that rocks have their own language. They creak, they groan, they whisper. You have to learn to listen to them. Silent River, who hadn't said a word up until that point, nodded. James felt the boy pressing his ear to the rocks, listening. He understands, Strongstone said with a grin. Rio had always heard things others couldn't, but always ready. James gave the signal. 3 levers, 6 pairs of hands, coordinated pressure. The wedges creaked. The rock groaned. For one terrible moment, the whole thing seemed about to collapse. Hold on, James shouted. Keep the pressure steady, don't let go. And then, with a sound like distant thunder, the rock shifted. Not much, just a few inches, but it was enough. The other rocks shifted with a series of cracks and snaps, but they didn't collapse. They rearranged themselves, so creating a space, an opening barely big enough for a thin man to squeeze through. The young men burst into cheers, but James held up his hand for silence, but not answered. We're not finished yet, he said, looking down into the narrow, dark opening. Now comes the hard part. Someone has to get in there and bring the treasure, and from the size of that entrance, That someone is me. Swift Eagle looked at the opening, James, then back at the opening. It's very narrow, he said, genuine concern in his voice. And dark. And if the rocks shift while you were inside, I know it. What? James tied a rope around his waist. That's why you're gonna hold it. If anything goes wrong, you pull me out. Okay? The 5 young men nodded. Their initial skepticism transformed into something else. Respect. James knelt in front of the opening, took a deep breath, and began to crawl out into the darkness. The darkness swallowed James like a living creature. The only sound was his own breathing, heavy and amplified by the rock walls surrounding him on all sides. The opening was so narrow that his shoulders scraped on either side as he crawled forward, pushing himself up with his elbows on Karak. Are you okay? Swift Eagle called from outside. His voice sounded distant, like an echo from another world. Yes, James replied, though he wasn't sure if it was true. I'm moving forward. The string is taut, isn't it? Like a bow ready to shoot, he braced himself against the strong stone. We won't let go. James continued to crawl. Every meter was a battle against his own survival instincts that screamed at him to turn back. The air smelled of damp earth and something older, something that hadn't been touched by sunlight for centuries. His hands probed the ground in front of him, searching for cracks, unevenness, anything that could mean danger. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes, the tunnel began to widen. James was able to get to his knees, then finally to his feet. He pulled a piece of flint and steel from his pocket and, with shaking hands, lit the small torch he had brought wrapped in cotton cloth. The light illuminated a cavern the size of a large room, and there, against the far wall, was the chest. It wasn't huge, but it was impressive. Dark wood, reinforced with metal bands, carved with symbols that James couldn't read, but that clearly meant something important. It was raised on a stone platform, as if the ancestors who had left it there had wanted to honor it, even in its hiding place. James approached it reverently. His hands touched the cold wood, and he felt the weight of generations. This was not just a treasure. It was living history, memory transformed into an object, a people's last connection to its roots. I found it, he shouted toward the entrance, his voice bouncing off the walls. I'm gonna start taking it out. He lifted the chest. It was heavy, very heavy. He estimated it must have weighed 40 or 50 kilograms. Lugging it through the narrow tunnel was going to be a monumental challenge. He began to walk backward toward the tunnel entrance, dragging the chest. He had taken barely 3 steps when he heard the sound, a low, deep creaking coming from the walls themselves. His heart was beating so hard he was sure the young man outside could hear it. Huía. James! The gray wolf's voice was strained. What was that noise? Don't move, James replied, his voice low but firm. No one's moving. Not a muscle. The cracking sound came again, louder. This time James looked up and saw small pieces of rock falling from the ceiling. The cave was reacting to the weight that had been removed. Of course, the chest had been there for so long that it had become part of the structural balance of the cavern. Listen to me very carefully, James said, keeping his voice calm even as his mind screamed in panic. When I say now, you're going to pull the rope with all your might. Oh, it doesn't matter how fast, just pull. Do you understand? Understood? 5 voices answered in unison. James took a deep breath, calculated the distance of the tunnel, about 50 feet. He would have to crawl with the chest while the cave likely collapsed on him. Not good odds, but they were the only ones he had. Ready, he shouted. Ready, they replied. Ow. Now James lunged forward, dragging the chest with a strength he hadn't known he had. Behind him, he heard the unmistakable sound of large rocks hitting the ground. The cave was collapsing. Dust and fragments filled the air, making him cough as he crawled. The rope around his waist tightened violently as the young men began to pull. James felt his body being dragged downward, the rocks on the ground, skidding his elbows and knees, but he didn't let go of the chest. His hands were locked around the metal handles with a grip that even death itself could not break. "Faster!" he heard Swift Eagle shout. "The entrance is closing." James couldn't see anything. The dust was so thick that the darkness was total. He could only keep going, crawling, pulling, feeling the rocks falling dangerously close to his legs. A rock the size of his fist hit his shoulder, sending a wave of pain that almost made him scream, but he kept going. And then, like a miracle, he felt strong hands grabbing him by the arms of his shirt, pulling him forward. Bright light hit his eyes as he emerged from the tunnel. Two of the young men grabbed him while the other three pulled the chest. "Run!" Silent River shouted, using his voice for the first time. "It's all going to collapse." They didn't need to be told twice. The 6 men ran down the mountain, stumbling, slipping, but not stopping. Behind them, they heard the deafening roar of tons of rock falling. The entrance to the cave disappeared completely, sealed forever by the collapse. They stopped halfway up the mountain, panting, their feet covered in dust. Ahead, for a long moment, no one spoke, just Sunsun, staring at each other, processing the fact that they were still alive. And then, Strongstone began to laugh. It was a nervous laugh, almost hysterical, but infectious. And soon they were all laughing, releasing the pent-up tension. "We did it," Northwind said, shaking his head in disbelief. He saw the chest. He looked at the chest, now covered in dust but unbroken. Every second of terror had been worth it. "We didn't make it," James said, looking at each of the young men in turn. "We made it all together. Without you guys pulling on that rope, I'd still be in there." Swift Eagle stepped closer and put a hand on James' shoulder, in the same spot where the rock had hit him. James winced, but didn't complain. "When we came up here this morning," the young man said, "I thought you were just another stranger who promised more than he could deliver. I was wrong. You are brave, and more than that, you are wise. You taught us more in one day than we learned in months. So let's go down." James struggled to his feet. "And let's give back to our people what is theirs." It took nearly 3 hours to carefully make their way down the mountain. The chest was heavy and the path treacherous. But when they finally reached the camp, when the 22 widows and Mother Rain saw what they had brought, shouts of joy could be heard all the way to the distant hills. So, James had recovered more than a treasure. He had restored the hope of an entire people, and something inside him that had been broken for so long was slowly beginning to heal. That night, the Apache camp was transformed into something James had never seen before. The women had built fires that formed a perfect circle around the central area Udarausualia. The air smelled of roasted meat, freshly baked bread, and herbs James didn't recognize, but they made his stomach growl with anticipation. The chest now sat in the center, open for all to see its contents. Turquoise and silver jewelry gleamed in the firelight, ancient tools carefully preserved, ceremonial objects engraved with the symbols of generations past. It wasn't gold or diamonds, but to this village it was worth more than any fortune. "It's beautiful," James murmured as he watched the women tennis each object reverently, some with tears, tanjo streaming down their cheeks, mussus. I didn't know something like this could mean so much, It's not just its material value. Mother Rain, who had sat down beside him, explained. Every piece tells a story. This bracelet belonged to my grandmother's grandmother. This ceremonial knife was forged by hands that are now dust. They are our memory, James. Without memory, a village dies even as its body continues to breathe. Children ran among the campfires, laughing for the first time in months. Elders shared stories, their voices rising and falling with the rhythm of born storytellers. Swift Eagle and the other young men were surrounded by attentive listeners as they told the story of the cave, exaggerating the danger only slightly. James had cleaned himself as best he could and had been given clean clothes. His wounds had been tended by expert hands. Now, sitting by the fire with a plate of hot food, he felt more at peace than he had in years. James Crawford. Mother Rain's voice rose above the hum of conversation. The camp fell silent. Come closer, please. James stood up, feeling all eyes on him. He walked toward the center, where Mother Rain stood beside the recovered chest. The firelight made his face seem carved from ancient bronze. Today, Mother Rain began, his voice clear and strong. An outsider did what we could not. He risked his life for a people that was not his, for a treasure that was not his, for women and children to whom he owed nothing. He took a moment's pause, allowing his words to float in the dark night air. In our traditions, when someone saves our people, that someone is no longer a stranger. They become family. They become one of us. Mother Rain pulled a silver necklace with a turquoise stone in the center from the chest. She placed it around James's neck with hands that shook slightly. This necklace, she said, belonged to my husband. He was a brave man, like you, a man who put others before himself. I would have wanted you to have it. James touched the necklace, feeling the weight of its meaning. He couldn't speak. His throat was tight with emotion, and then something happened that James hadn't expected. All 22 widows rose at the same time, moving with a synchronization that suggested this had been planned. They formed a circle around James, their faces illuminated by the fire. Some were young, barely older than teenagers. Others had years of experience etched into their features, but all shared the same expression, hope, mixed with determination. A woman stepped forward. She was middle-aged, with hair as black as night and eyes that sparkled with intelligence. James remembered seeing her tending to the younger children during the day. My name is Morningstar, she said, in a soft but firm voice. I speak for all of us. James felt his heart begin to beat faster. There was something in the air, an anticipation that he couldn't quite place, but it made him nervous. You gave us back our dignity, Morningstar continued. You gave us back our past, and with it, our future. Without that treasure, we would face the winter with nothing to trade, with no way to feed our children. You saved our lives. The other women nodded. A murmur of agreement filled the circle. Our people have lost so much. Morningstar made a sweeping gesture with her hand. 22 husbands, 22 fathers, 22 protectors. We are left vulnerable. The young are brave but inexperienced. The old are wise but fragile. We need strength. We need experience. We need a man to show us that there is still goodness out in this difficult world. James was beginning to understand where this was going, and panic was starting to creep up his spine. Pop. So Morningstar took a deep breath. We have something we want to offer you. If you wish, If your heart allows it, you can choose one of us and stay. Marry, truly become a part of our family. The silence that followed was so thick that James could hear the crackling of the campfires, the sigh of the wind through the rocks, the wild beating of his own heart. James, he tried to speak, but the words refused to form. I did not expect. You do not have to answer now. Mother Rain spoke gently. This is a decision that must be made with a calm heart, not with the high emotions of a night of celebration. James looked around the circle. Each woman regarded him with a mixture of hope and vulnerability that tore at his heart. This was not just a marriage they offered, this was survival, this was a future, this was the chance to rebuild broken lives. I need time, he finally managed to say. This is an enormous honor, but I need to think. I can have until tomorrow at dawn. You can have all the time you need, Morningstar replied. A marriage built on pressure is no marriage at all, not at all. It must be a free choice or it is worthless. The women then dispersed west, returning to the celebration, though James noticed that many were glancing at him as they ate and talked. The young warriors watched him with expressions that mixed curiosity, respect, and something that could be jealousy. James walked away from the circle of fire, walking towards the edge of the camp where darkness was beginning to fall. He sat on a rock, looking at the stars that sparkled like diamonds scattered across black velvet. His mind was in turmoil. He had come here, fleeing a painful past, seeking only a place to rest for a night. And now he was being offered a future, a family, a reason to stay in one place after years of wandering aimlessly. But was this what he truly wanted, or was it just the temptation to escape his loneliness? And if he accepted, how would he choose? How could a man choose between 22 women, each with her own story, her own pain, her own hope? In his head, unanswered questions swirled and echoed as the night deepened and the camp gradually settled into a profound silence. James did not sleep that night. He could not. As the camp rested under the blanket of stars, he paced among the tents, lost in thoughts that chased each other like wolves in circles. It was Mother Rain who found him sitting by the embers of a dying campfire just before dawn. Men who think too much seldom find peace, she said, sitting down beside him without asking permission. But men who don't think at all find only disaster. You're somewhere in between, James Crawford, and that's a good thing. I don't know what to do, James admitted, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. All my life I've been running from my past, from my mistakes, from the people who tried to get close to me. And now, when I finally have a reason to stay, I'm terrified of choosing wrong. Wrong for whom? Mother Rain asked. For them or for you? James fell silent. It was a good question. Come. Mother Rain stood up. There's someone I think you should get to know better before the sun comes up, and you have to give an answer. She led him through the sleeping camp to a smaller tent, set apart from the others. A soft light came from inside, and the sound of a female voice softly singing a lullaby. Mother Rain pushed aside the doorway. Come in, she's awake. James entered and found Morningstar sitting beside two small children sleeping on furs. The light from a small oil lamp illuminated her face as she sang. When she saw James, she paused but smiled. I wasn't expecting company this early, she said softly. Careful not to wake the children, but you're welcome. Sorry to bother you. James sat down near the doorway, keeping a respectful distance. Mother Rain thought we should talk. Mother Rain is wise. Morningstar looked at the sleeping children with infinite tenderness. These are my children. Little Hawk is 5. Soft Moon is 3. They lost their father when they were so young, they barely remember him. Sometimes Hawk asks me what he was like, and I tell him stories, but his voice cracked slightly. But stories aren't the same as having a father. James finished for her. Morningstar didn't admit it. Stories don't teach a boy to hunt, to track, to be strong, twack. Stories don't hold a girl when she has nightmares. They were silent for a moment. James watched as the woman gently stroked her daughter's hair as she slept. "Why you?" James asked finally. "Yesterday you spoke for all women." "Why?" Morningstar smiled sadly. "Because I was the one who suggested the idea. The other widows, some are younger, more beautiful. Some are stronger, more capable. But I understood something that perhaps they didn't fully see." "What?" "That it's not about us." Her eyes gleamed in the lamplight. "It's about survival. It's about giving our children a chance to grow up with dignity, Lily. I saw the way you looked at the mountain yesterday. I saw the way you calculated every risk. The way you protected the young while risking your own life. That is not the behavior of a man who seeks only reward. It's the demeanor of a man who understands what it means to care for others." James felt something crack inside his chest. For years, he had built walls around his heart, convinced that it was safer to be alone. But this woman, with her brutal honesty and her fierce love for her children, was dismantling those walls with every word. "I'm afraid," James admitted, the words spilling out before he could stop them. "Afraid that I'll fail, that I won't be good enough, that I'll become just another person who promises and then disappears and then disappears." Fear is natural. Morningstar moved closer, but not touching him. "I'm afraid that I'll trust again. Afraid that my children will learn to love someone who will then leave. Afraid that I'll open my heart to a man who perhaps only feels obligated out of gratitude." "It's not an obligation," James said quickly. "But I feel I don't know exactly what it is yet, but it's not an obligation." The first rays of sunlight were beginning to filter through the cracks in the tent. Outside, the camp was just waking up. He would have to give an answer soon. "Morningstar." James took a deep breath. "I can choose like this. It wouldn't be fair. To you, to the other women, to myself. Choosing a wife in a night under pressure, after a day of extreme emotions, that's not how you build something real." He saw disappointment cross her face, but also understanding. But he continued quickly, "I want to do something different. I want to give you my word that when spring comes, I will return. I will spend the winter working, thinking, making sure this is real, and not just the impulse of a lonely man looking to fill a void." He stepped closer, looking her straight in the eyes. "And when I return in the spring, if you are still willing, if your children will accept me, if your heart tells me this is my place, then I will ask you to be my wife. Wife. Not out of obligation, not out of gratitude, but because I chose to come, because I chose to stay, because I chose you." Morningstar froze me, processing his words. A tear rolled down her cheek, listening. "In the dawn light, or if you don't come back," she asked, her voice barely audible. "Then I was never the man you thought I was," and James replied. "But I will come back. I swear to you on that treasure we recovered, on the mountain that almost buried me, on these children who deserve better than empty promises." Morningstar slowly extended her hand. James took it. Their fingers intertwined for a moment that seemed suspended in time. "I will wait until spring," she said finally. "If you have not returned by then, I will know that fate had other plans for both of them." "You need wait no longer," James promised. When they emerged from the tent, they found the entire camp awake and waiting. The 22 widows stood in a semicircle. Mother Rain stood at the front, with the young warriors behind her. James walked to the center, with Morningstar at his side. "I have made my decision," he announced in a clear voice. "I do not choose today, but I promise to return in the spring, and when I do, if she will have me, I will ask Morningstar to be my wife." There were murmurs of surprise, some of disappointment, but also of respect. Mother Rain nodded slowly, a knowing smile crossing her face. "A man who knows how to wait is a man who knows what he wants," she said. "Go then, James Crawford. Do what you must, but remember that you have a family here waiting for you." James mounted his horse, now fully healed. Before they rode off, Morningstar came over and handed him something small wrapped in cloth. "For the road," he said, "and as a reminder." James opened it later, when the camp was just a dot in the distance. It was a small carved wooden figure, a hawk, the symbol of his son. He smiled, holding it close to his heart, and rode off into the horizon with a promise he knew he would keep. James opened it later, when the camp was just a dot in the distance. It was a small carved wooden figure, a falcon, the symbol of his son. He smiled, holding it close to his heart. The road ahead was long, the winter would be hard, and he would have to work every day to prove himself worthy of that promise. But for the first time in years, he had something to return to. He had a home waiting for him. He rode toward the horizon as the sun rose behind him, lighting the way. Spring would come soon, and when it did, James Crawford would keep his word. For some men run from promises, but real men come home.